But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should move on to Bayern and then
Yeah,
give them the praise that they're due this weekend.
absolutely. I mean, we are going to probably have to talk about Leverkusen in the transfer show because it looks like reinforcements are coming. So, stay tuned on that. At least one defender and a mystery striker. We'll see who that's going to be. So, stay tuned for the transfer show, which we're going to hammer out on Tuesday for subscribers only on YouTube and, of course, on the Substack. Let's talk about Bayern Munich because they were able to do what Leverkusen weren't able to do, and that's to hold on to a two-goal lead. And I think that was something actually I thought was pretty remarkable because this Freiburg side going into this match had only lost at home once. They're one of the best teams in the Bundesliga at home. 6 wins, two draws, and one defeat going into this. And so they pick up their second defeat, and there was moments where I thought that Freiburg could maybe do what Leipzig did to Leverkusen and make this 2-2 and keep the gap at the top where it was. They didn't quite manage to do this, and it's because Bayern Munich, I thought, did a really good job of smothering them, doing the best to kind of just killing the game off. Steadying. When they lost to Rotterdam midweek, there was a lot of voices that we have to set this right. And there were some commentators that thought, okay, now Bayern are going to go into Freiburg and just absolutely smash them. I just don't think the Bayern side quite have that in them this year. But they do have the ability to just shut down games. And they did do that exactly. Last year, this would have been a game last year where that would have ended 2-2 or 3-2 for Freiburg, right? And that's just the difference maybe a little bit this year, that from a tactical position, Kompany has done a really good job of making this team just a little bit more rounded. Now, I do think the amount of injuries that are now coming to the forefront could be an issue. Goretzka picked up an injury in this game. He's hopefully only out for a few days. Alphonso Davies, his injury turned from just a couple of weeks to 6 to 8 weeks now, right? And I do think down the stretch that is going to be an issue because there's a significant drop-off from Alphonso Davies to Guerrero, especially this year where Alphonso Davies has been his former self, right? And then, yes, Josip Stanisic made his comeback. That is great news. I'm not sure he's the big difference maker, but he also made his comeback on a day where, as I mentioned, Leon Goretzka hobbled off. João Paulinho is back in the side too. Pavlovic started this match. He looks back to his former fitness, former best. But yeah, I mean, it's just this Bayern Munich side. Players are coming back just at the right time when other players are going off with injuries. So, they have the depth to compensate this now. And bearing some major thing with Matthijs Tell, I don't think they're going to do much in this transfer window either. And I don't think they have to. And the other positive is Harry Kane, finally, for the first time since November 22nd, scores a goal from open play. And as you said before we went on this podcast, it seemed a goal scored out of frustration. I mean, did he ever hammer that home? And his goal celebrations are always the same, but this one felt a little bit more satisfying for the English captain.
Yeah, it did. I do wonder if Vincent Kompany maybe applied the old hairdryer treatment, which was an old expression they used to use for Sir Alex Ferguson when he was at Man United, when he screamed so loud at players it looked as though they were being blown in the face by a hairdryer. I wonder if he did that and applied it towards Harry Kane and Kim after the final game, because I think you could probably argue they were two of Bayern's biggest culprits for the defeat. Obviously, Kim making a huge mishap for the first goal, and then Kane just completely anonymous in the box. And it was perhaps quite fitting that both of them stepped up for the goal. We were discussing before we came on air, although I think goals like this should stand, I think Kim's goal and the way that he maybe went up and challenged the goalkeeper, I've seen them not be given. But, I don't have a problem with it counting because I think goalkeepers should be allowed to be challenged in the air like that. But I'm just saying that for the record.
Yeah.
But then it was an interesting game. It was almost quite different from the Feyenoord game, where Bayern in that Champions League match created a huge amount of chances but just couldn't finish any of them, and looked like a team that were overpassing, overcompensating, trying to pass the ball into the back of net, to use a well-coined term. And then Feyenoord just picked them off and just kind of bounced the ball up the pitch and just kind of ran onto it, took advantage of it through Jimenez, obviously. This is a match where Bayern actually created very few chances. It was actually their lowest XG in an away game in the Bundesliga all season. I was just quickly checking that there. And yeah, I think you said Vincent Kompany said it was a huge result for them, because I think you said he stated Freiburg have the second best home record going into this game or something like that.
Yeah, he said that, but I'm not sure where he's getting that from.
Yeah, well,
I mean, as I mentioned, their home record is very good, but it wasn't the second best going into this match.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe he meant that, like, in terms of defeats.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, yeah, Freiburg are a very good team. Don't get me wrong. I think you could maybe argue on another day they maybe deserve a point if you want to argue about the Kim goal. I'm not on that opinion, but some people may be. But either way, it was. I guess what I'm looking for is a very clinical performance, whereas the Feyenoord game was not. And something that really stood out to me, which I checked this before we started recording, was that now with 48 points from 19 league games, Kompany's team have won, and I'm now reading what I put on Blue Sky before recording here for a minute, but I've now won more points in the Bundesliga at this stage of the season than any previous Bayern Munich side since 2015-2016, which was Pep Guardiola's last season at the club. So you have to give credit where it's due. I think we could argue to the cows come home about Bayern's performances in the Champions League, in knockout competitions. You could argue about the Borussia Dortmund game, the Bayer Leverkusen game, things of that ilk. But at the end of the day, Bayern Munich seemed to be getting the job done in the Bundesliga in a way that's quite reminiscent. I maybe wouldn't go so far as to say they're as good as Pep Guardiola's sides, but it's at times they have looked similar to the Bayern Munich of old, where they have this air of earned superiority against domestic teams. And anything but 3 points was considered a huge upset. And as we said a moment ago, we were talking about Leverkusen. Last season, they dropped 15 points from winning positions. This season, they've only dropped 2.
Yeah.
If Vincent Kompany's job when he arrived at the club in the summer, and the president and Max Abel and whoever else, and Freund sat him down and said, here's the very first thing you have to do before anything else, and it was win the Bundesliga, then you could argue he's done very little wrong in that regard. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how they perform in the Champions League and things like that. But in terms of, maintaining a gold standard in the Bundesliga, I think Bayern Munich have been really, really impressive. And this game was a perfect example of that. Maybe it wasn't the most exciting match in the world, but they got the job done. And that's really all you can ask of Bayern Munich at this stage with Vincent Kompany.
So I looked this up. Noah Atbolo, who I think is a fantastic goalkeeper talent, and I think is going to develop to be in contention for being Germany's future number one. The other one is the one that Bayern Munich is assigning as we speak, and that's the young goalkeeper from Köln, who, now that he's leaving Köln, is destined to be the world's best goalkeeper down the road. Just like Florian Wirtz developed after he left Köln. That's just the Köln curse. That's just how it is. But
unless Manuel Neuer signs a new contract and he ends up on loan at Stuttgart or something.
I think Manuel Neuer has been told in due course that he cannot pull the same antics a second time.
No ski trips.
No, well, I think if he pulls a ski trip, then that will probably be it for him. But he's been told he has to help develop Urbeck. And I've been told he's on board because he understands that he just, he can tell too. He can't play these amount of games anymore. Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent. We can probably put this on the transfer show, the Urbeck deal, because it will be done by the time the transfer show comes around and we can discuss it then. But Noah Atubolo, who I think is going to be an incredible goalkeeper. He's only 22 and goalkeepers take longer to develop. His size, he's 1.90 m, so 6'4", and he weighs 98 kilograms. So that's 220 pounds. I feel with those body measurements, and when you're allowed to use your hands, you should be able to fight someone off like Kim. Even though Kim is a pretty big guy himself, you should be able to do it. And in fact, if you are a goalkeeper these days, the 6-yard box isn't a sanctuary like it used to be, which I personally think is good because we need more goals. When I played goalkeeper, I was told, use whatever you need to use to defend that area. That is your area. You need to go in strong. The ball is yours. And let's be honest, if you go in with your elbows and you get to that ball first, you can get away with murder. The referees will let you do whatever you need to do. And that's why I have very little sympathy for Atapolo conceding this goal. He should have done better. And it's going to be a really good lesson for him, because there's no way in the world that gets whistled down in Champions League, for example. You know, when he gets to that level at some point, that is where if he wants to become one of Germany's best goalkeepers, he will have to eventually play at a Champions League level club. And there's no chance in the world that will get whistled down in Champions League. So, you know, this was a good lesson for him. He has to get to that ball first, and he has to get, if he needs to, he has to get through Kim and make sure he gets through Kim there too. So, yeah, my sympathy are limited when it comes to that first goal, or second goal rather, right?
Yeah, just for the record, I do agree with you. I don't think it was. I don't think the goal should have been ruled out. Like I said, I've seen it given, but I think you've made the perfect point. He doesn't get the ball first. He uses it an excuse. You can see when he falls to the ground, he's looking to the officials, which really annoys me because, well, that annoys me in itself, because you can see these young goalkeepers are now they're not playing to the whistle. They're playing to the expectation that they're defended at all rates.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. Maybe hopefully learned a lesson this weekend, and next time he's in that position, he'll just go through the player and make sure he gets to the ball.
I mean, there's so many examples of Manuel Neuer, right? I mean, in that World Cup that Germany won, he absolutely killed attacking players, whether it was against Algeria, against France, that final against Argentina, where he got to the ball on so many occasions first, but like absolutely destroyed the attacking players. You get away with that as a goalkeeper, right? So do it. Especially if you decide, like Noah Artobolo, use that body of yours. Yeah, your body is a weapon that you're allowed to use, so use it. And so, yeah, you got to do better. I have absolutely no problems with that goal. And I actually feel like Kim did a really good job in that situation. As you mentioned, you know, after a game where he looked really poor, he had a really strong performance in this one and scoring a really, really important goal for Bayern Munich that we might look back to now. It's like, when did Bayern Munich win this title? Like, well, when they defended their 2-1 lead against Freiburg and gave themselves that 6-point lead over Leverkusen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it'll be really interesting to kind of see, as you said, you know, a few minutes ago, before we wrap up there, how Bayern do kind of deal with these injuries going forward, because I'm more than happy to give Bayern the kind of benefit of the doubt here and say, you know, not benefit of the doubt, sorry, give them their praise, which they absolutely are deserving of. But as we've talked about numerous times, at Bayern Munich, you're only, 3 performances or 3 defeats away from disaster. And they do have some decent games coming up. Interesting enough, maybe a run of relatively easy games. They got Bratislava, the final Champions League match at home, which they'll obviously win at Cantor, and then Holstein Kiel. Then they play Werder Bremen, who will be coming to Allianz Arena and not expected to win, but obviously Werder Bremen are still very, very good away from home. So they might cause a problem there. Then they go to Bayer Leverkusen, which, as we mentioned, could be something of a title decider. Then they play Frankfurt. Then they play Stuttgart. So they're basically playing 3 of the other top 4 teams between now and the end of February. And, you know, that'll be interesting to see how they do there, because we had this discussion not that long ago, actually, after match day 8 or 9, I think, and we said, yeah, it was after match day 4 where they beat Werder Bremen 5-0, hadn't lost a game, scoring goals for fun, had only conceded like 1 goal, I think, in the first kind of, or 3 goals in the first kind of 7 or 8 games of the season. And we said, hey, look, this is great, but they've got Leverkusen, Aston Villa, Frankfurt, and then Stuttgart, and then Barcelona coming up. And he went on to then draw that Leverkusen game, lose to Aston Villa, draw to Frankfurt, beat Stuttgart, and then get thumped off Barcelona. And the narrative completely flipped from saying Vincent Kompany's got this sorted to, what the hell is this guy doing in charge of Bayern Munich? So we're almost in the exact same situation. Has been mirrored again in the second half of the season here. So it'll be interesting to see how Bayern have learned from those mistakes and where they can deal with those 3 games better than the kind of really tough run they had, start of season. Not to mention the fact that obviously there'll then be the knockout stages of the Champions League, which will filter into that fixture list as well.
Yeah, no, they gotta beat Slovan. Bratislava by a lot of goals to ensure that they are in that top 8. Because if you play the playoffs, that could be a big issue. They could decide the title race, right? Because if Leverkusen, for example, avoid the playoffs, that's 2 games less. So yeah, that I think that's something to keep an eye on.